Hello and welcome to episode 301 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast in all of the internet. My name is Jordan Willis.
My name is Summer Rain.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest on today's episode of the show. We have Associate Professor of Economics at Belmont University, Dustin Rumbaugh, on the show. How's it going, Dustin?
Hey. All right, Dustin's here to talk to us about the economics of the Switch 2. We got a lot of weird news this week, not game-related, due to Trump administration's tariff policies, and Dustin's going to help us break it down. Someone who is a little smarter than us in this area of expertise.
At least has tenure of some sort, maybe. I don't know.
I'm just credentialed. That doesn't.
We'll see about that by the end of the show, Dustin.
That's more than us.
Yeah, but before we get into all that, we got, of course, there was a Nintendo Treehouse. We're going to talk all about those games, some pricing controversy, and just a general Switch 2 news roundup. A lot of extra news now that the whole thing is announced. We got a lot of extra updates and things like that. But before we get into all that, how is everyone doing?
Pretty good. It has been a really insane week for Nintendo news. We'll get into it a lot in the news section here, but it's like, I think since the Switch 2 Direct, because we recorded our last episode on like the night that Direct happened, there have been just like news drops every single day, right? So full transparency, after episode 300, we were like, maybe it's time for us to finally take a week off of this show. We've kind of like earned it. But then just like the deluge of news happened. And then the Trump tariffs happened. And then it was like, okay, I think we're going to have to talk about this on the show. So I'm very glad to be back. I'm also excited to try out some new stuff with the show here. Obviously, R.I.P. Patrick. We already miss Patrick very much. Feeling a giant Patrick-sized hole in my heart right now. But bear with us as we kind of make our way through the new show. But other than that, I'm having a pretty good time. What about y'all?
I'm doing all right. It was my birthday day before, and I got what I wanted for my birthday, which was proof of life from Doug Bowser. So he is alive. Reggie Fils-Aimé, he is not, but he is making the rounds and answering questions very generically. But yeah, I had a pretty good weekend. I saw The Brood, the David Cronenberg film. Still like it. I hadn't seen it probably in 15 years. So it's still really enjoyable. And then just kind of chilled a lot of the rest of the weekend, which is nice. Got some chores done, stuff like that. But yeah, just it's only been a few days since we recorded, so it feels a little strange.
Are you excited for Shrouds, the new Cronenberg film?
Yes, they played the trailer at The Brood, and I'm like, this looks super bizarre, and
looks really good.
Yeah, I'm very excited. I'm glad that he's kind of had like a late career return to drama horror kind of stuff like that, because no one else is quite doing it like him now. Everything is kind of more jump scary. He's a little bit more intellectual, psychological. So yeah, to answer your question, yes, David, I am excited to see it.
Super Film Heads.
Yes.
I'm doing good. I've had a very musical previous week. I got to go see the Blue Shift Big Band again. They are a big band, jazz band, VGM cover band here in Chicago. Always do a fantastic job. They're just really doing some incredible stuff. Found out that a couple of the guys in that band were playing in a Frank Sinatra cover band at a venue that's closer to where I live, like a music club here in Berwyn. So went to go see that for a brunch show on Saturday, and that was phenomenal. They played through the Songs for Swingin' Lovers album, but all of their own arrangements all the way through. Really nice. And then I went to a squeeze box session later that day at the accordion shop that's on the south side, where we just play a bunch of songs together, take turns playing songs to each other, at each other. Got my accordion completely looked at. They completely stripped it apart and put it back together. And I was like, what do I owe you? And they were like, nothing. And I was like, awesome.
Wow.
They're apparently doing free apprenticeship there on Saturdays when they don't have the squeeze sessions. So I'm going to go start learning how to repair my own accordion, because that's just incredible.
I have learned so much about accordion maintenance just at the beginning of this episode alone. This is truly a phenomenal episode of Super Switch.
I was playing one of the shop's accordions while I was waiting for them to work on mine, and then suddenly I heard them with my accordion just really like vigorously go like ring with it, and it like completely got my attention. I immediately like turned my head towards it, and I was like, oh. But like they're professionals, they know what they're doing. Getting ready for VGM Con this upcoming weekend. I'm going to be in Minneapolis. Really excited to just go play a bunch of video game music with a bunch of other nerds. So that's me.
Very cool. Dustin, how about you? How was your week this past week?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, this is the time of the year when everything's coming to a head in academics, where the academic year is about to end, so graduation's coming up and just all these different ceremonies and things like that. But I've been doing my best to get back into the kind of physical world of making things, which is something I'm into. So woodworking, starting to warm up, open the garage up, get out there. But yeah, so that's been my week this week.
Very cool. Glad to hear it. Well, we've got a lot of shout outs for the last week. We had so many people tune in to last week's episode of the show. We did a live stream show, which is kind of rare for us. So that was amazing to see so many of the Switch Headz community in the chat. Obviously can't shout out everybody that was there, but I did want to give a couple shout outs to a few of the people that left nice comments on our YouTube. Krakow saying congrats on 300 episodes, and Hans Gauger saying RIP PDYX. RIP PDYX would have rolled right off the tongue, but if you want to put a space in there, that's fine. I understand that, Hans. We also had some great comments as well. Cool Uncle Vinny of the Piantas, aka Vince, said, nice, a 3-hour-long podcast for my workout today. Absolutely, that is the longest episode we've ever done. I guarantee you today's will not be as long, unless... No, I'm just kidding.
You don't know how long I'll go.
Yeah, that's true. We're about to break down all of the American economy on this episode. Very excited about it. Zach said amazing episode. On to 600. You guys think we're going to make it to 600 episodes? I think so. We'll see, unless we die, like P-Dix. And then also we got a very nice comment from Shade as well, who wasn't able to tune in live to the episode, but said some really, really nice things as well in the Discord. Kind of a bit too long to shout out right here, but Shade, we love you very much, and we want to thank everybody for all the kind comments on that last episode. And like I said before, your patience as we kind of figure out exactly what we're doing with the show. I feel like we might be working towards a bit of a reboot of sorts of Super Switch Headz as the Switch 2 comes out in June, which is kind of very exciting. And as we're kind of fumbling our way there with no P-Dix in tow, it'll be an interesting time. So I'd like to just say now, if there's anything that you'd like to see with the show, or if there's anything that you have like any thoughts on the format of the show or anything like that, we'd love to hear it in the Discord. That's a great place to do that. So you can join us on the Discord. We'll have a link to that in the description of this episode. We also have a Patreon, which we'd love to have you join if you're able to help us out financially. We'd love to have your support over on the Patreon. You get access to a patron-only Discord channel where people post lots of pictures of their kids and pets. So that sounds good, right? That's worth $5 or $10. And lots of others as well, like our YouTube channel. We have a video version of the show. Please give us a like and subscribe over there so you can see our beautiful faces. Summer's got a wonderful moving color lamp in the background of today's episode.
I'm trying
it's going to be distracting me the entire time.
I can turn it off.
Kidding. No, please keep it on. I love it. It's the only thing keeping me sane in this fucking world. $40. Other than that, guys, you guys know the drill. Tell a friend about the show and like us on Apple and all that kind of stuff. Patrick usually does this, so I'm fumbling my way through the intro, but I think it's time for us to move on to the news and rumors. What do you guys think? You guys ready for this? Let's get right into it, because like I said at the very beginning, there has been so much to talk about. There was a lot in that Nintendo Direct, but there was just as much seemingly information that was left out. And I think firstly, one of the things we'd like to talk about was the Nintendo Treehouse that happened in the 2 days following the Nintendo Direct proper. This was a 4-hour presentation, I think, on the first day of the Treehouse, and a 3-hour presentation on the second day of the Treehouse. They went over lots of games. Before we get into some of the nitty gritty, were you guys able to watch any of the Treehouse this year, and did anything stand out to you?
I watched most of it. I watched as much of it as I could. I kept it on whenever possible, and I would basically just mute it when I went into meetings. And I Oh, what was a standout for me? I'm not gonna lie. I'm really, really excited about Mario Kart World. I know that they showed off a lot of different games, but I I know that there's a lot of discourse about the price of it. I'm ready. I don't care. I'm fully in after seeing. There's so many little details that I just adore with this kind of thing. Like this is like 100% what I love about Nintendo that that's shining through just from the little bit of gameplay that we've seen in the Treehouse that has me amped up. I can't wait for the direct. I'm really excited.
Yeah, I mean, just on Mario Kart World, if I could add, I think that so far it really seems like it's a pretty complete package with the kind of free roaming, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of in-between stuff as well. But as a reminder, we do still have a whole Mario Kart Direct coming up on the 17th of this month as well. So I have a feeling that there's quite a bit more that they haven't shown so far, and I'm really excited to see more there. But yeah, everything I was seeing seemed like a ton of fun. Playing online with 24 players sounds really cool. What about you, Jordan? Was there anything that kind of stood out to you from the Treehouse?
Yeah, the Knockout Tour mode in Mario Kart World looks right up my alley. Like when they did 24 players, I'm like, how do you make this more interesting than just like a straight up Grand Prix or a race? So that mode is probably how I'll play it a lot until I get really frustrated by the hardcores and I just hop off. The Metroid Prime 4 Beyond looked great, but I mean, I really didn't need to see anything else. It's like I'm sold. I think the standout for me there was, and they kept mentioning it in the stream as well. They were like, and just so you know, we are streaming this in 4K. So if you're watching this on your 4K TV, you can see what the quality looks like. And like, I did check it out and it does look a bit more crisp, but it's like, I mean, as long as it plays smooth. But I think I liked how they were using it kind of as a way to showcase performance mode versus quality mode. Specifically, they were like, okay, this is running in quality mode. So it's going to be like in 4K at 60, capped at 60 frames per second. And then, you know, if you're more worried about your frames, you could do that. So it was just kind of interesting to see that. And then they kind of showed off some other, like more of like a traditional like mouse and keyboard style ish setup for like the shooting and stuff like that. So like, just like I imagined, they turned the right Joy-Con 2 on its side and used it as a mouse to kind of like control the cursor. It's pretty cool. It's like completely integrated into the gameplay to where you don't have to stop and pause or do anything.
That's right. You just put the thing down on the pad and it immediately kind of pops into mouse mode. That's pretty cool to see. Very
Nintendo. Like that's the level of like hardware polish I'm looking to see. So that was like really nice to kind of get that confirmation. But I mean, I could go on, but
but Dustin, what about you? Are there any standouts from the Treehouse?
Yeah, I think Knockout Tour also for me is a huge thing. I think we're in our house, at least we're big Fall Guys fans. So we on the weekends, we might sit around and play that with kids and just kind of pass controller, take turns type thing. And to me, it feels like there's a huge opportunity there to sort of, I mean, they didn't show it, but this opportunity to kind of go through different Mario Kart game modes in that sort of Knockout Tour thing would be interesting to me.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Like it kind of turns into battle for one of them and then maybe goes to a race or something like that. That could be a cool idea.
You know, I think with a lot of these drag times drive, the mouse mode with that seemed interesting too. I think I like the idea of mouse mode. I was playing some old SNES games on NSO just the other day, and was reminded about Super Nintendo mouse. It's one of those things where I just had not thought about it for so long.
Totally.
And it'll be interesting to see how that kind of develops and how that shows itself in some of these games.
Yeah, I'd love to see like Mario Paint, or was it Yoshi's? What was it? Wario's Woods, I think, was one of them that used. Now, there was a couple games that used mouse on Super Nintendo. I'd love to see those added to Nintendo Switch Online on the Switch too. I think that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff. Totally get what you're saying about Fall Guys and Knockout Tour. I am getting vibes of that. It does almost feel kind of like a battle royale, right? I mean, it's got that kind of F-Zero 99 style place out thing. It also kind of reminds me of how they did bowling in Nintendo Switch Sports, where you kind of get knocked out if you have lower points. So I think that'll particularly be a very fun online mode. And that's exciting because, I mean, I love Mario Kart Online, but it really is just playing races over and over and over again, right? So having a couple different things you can do online is really cool. Yeah, I think Metroid Prime 4 Beyond really does look incredible in 4K, and being able to go up to 120 hertz is still kind of mind-boggling to me. I mean, I don't really feel like I need 120 hertz, but I think especially if you're going to be using mouse mode, that kind of input that PC gamers are used to, I think that's going to be really nice for a lot of people. So good on you if that's exciting for you. Yeah, I mean, there was so much more that they showed. We can't really get into all of it, but I think, Legend of Zelda was really starting to show its worth in this upgrade pack. I don't know that if it wasn't included in Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack, I don't know that I would buy this upgrade, because I don't know how realistically I'm going to play through the entire Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild campaign again, especially having played through that entire basically same map of Hyrule twice now. Going back and playing it a third and fourth time kind of seems like a little bit much, but because it is included in it, that's definitely something I'm going to at least fire up and fuck around with and kind of see what's going on in there. Yeah. And then I think just lastly, I just want to bring up F-Zero GX. I'm just so glad that they were able to show off some of these GameCube games. Something that I've been hearing a lot of people say online is oh, it says Nintendo Classics, so I think these are all going to be Nintendo first-party games on GameCube. But that's actually an entire rebrand of Nintendo Switch Online. As you guys know, those apps have had really unwieldy names, I guess Super Nintendo Entertainment System Nintendo Switch Online is the official name of the app on your Switch. I think that's being renamed to Nintendo Classics overall. So that's really nice to see as well. But it was really cool to get some of that stuff in there. And yeah, cool. I'm still figuring out how to do transitions as the host of the show. So we're going to move right on. Another thing that was basically happening pretty much since the Direct and since the price was revealed for the system, but particularly in the chat of the Treehouse being spammed nonstop, was this chant of drop the price in all caps. There is pricing controversy with the Switch 2, and there is no two ways around it. I think there's kind of a number of things in here that people can point to. I think people got a lot of sticker shock looking at the $450 price of the console itself, right? Now that is, I think in pounds, it's about £420. There's different kind of pricing all over these different currencies and denominations right now. But in the US anyway, it is $450 with the base price, $500 with the pack in. I don't know what you guys are expecting about that. We can get to it in a second, but I think that's one element. Another one is obviously the unbroken ground now of $80 games with Mario Kart has a lot of people reeling from sticker shock. And also some of these Nintendo Switch 2 versions are going to be retailing at $80 as well. One little bit of good news that we got today with kind of the deluge of interviews that came out is that Welcome Tour, Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour will only be $10. I got a question for you guys. What do you guys think about the price of these games? Do you think this is a little overblown? Are you going to pick up Welcome Tour now that it's $10?
I think for the Welcome Tour with the $10 price tag, I'm really glad I was wrong. I was really convinced, since 1-2 Switch was $50, and I was like, oh, surely they won't do that again. And then they released everybody 1-2 Switch. I'm like, no way. I can't not believe that they put two of these out. So I was just really convinced. So I'm glad I'm wrong about that. As far as Mario Kart goes, man, I feel two ways about it. One, I think it sets a uncomfortable precedent that they can charge $80 for games and gamers will buy it. But games have been $60 since I was in high school. And as I said, it's my birthday and I am old now. So it's just it makes sense. I think where I get really stuck is as we move forward into an all digital future, physical games inherently have a cost just from building the package, building the cart, etc. Mm-hmm. Digital games do not have the same costs associated with it. And I personally believe that they should be cheaper by $10. So that's why I'm a little wary. Now, that being said, I feel like Mario Kart is a game that they will continue to support. And I think they really dropped the ball announcing this direct, the Mario Kart World Direct later on, because I'm sure there's going to be updates and things like that go along for a few years that kind of justify a higher price point, because not every game is going to be $80 as we've seen. So I don't know. I feel really conflicted, to be honest. I'm probably still going to pay it, but Am I going to be happy about it? I don't know.
Yeah, you're not wrong in that it might have been a good idea for them to drop the price of this game at the direct, specifically for the game, in a little bit after they show off a lot of these features, right? Instead of kind of being like, trust us, bro.
Yeah.
Dustin, you had something to say about that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different things going on. It's interesting that, this $80 price point, nobody loves it, but at the same time, they have a history of at least supporting their games long term, right? And like, it's not, they're not giving this half broken game that perhaps will get fixed later. They're constantly supporting the games and updating them where it needs to be updated. So I that makes me feel better about it. You can do these kind of price comparisons over time, and Jordan just talked about remembering games being $60. And when this dropped in one of my group chats, someone posted a picture of it was from November '94. It was an ad, and it was the release for Shaq Fu, and Shaq Fu was $65 when it released on Super NES. So it's like that was 20, 30 years ago now, and so it's like it's more expensive, but it'll come up later. But the digital versus physical games. I mean, one of the things that we're going to see, I think, almost necessarily soon is that digital games are not subject to tariffs. Physical games are, right? And those Nintendo branded games, look at the back of the package, made in Japan. So there's going to be this kind of push toward these digital games almost out of necessity. And for me personally, I mean, I have a feeling you all are on the same page a little bit. I still love the physical game in a certain way. And if it's a game that I care about, I'm going to buy the physical one because I just want to have it,
Yeah. I mean, with the Switch generation, that's been my first time really going fully digital for me. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it is a portable system, that I want to be able to have those games on me at all times without having to bring cartridges with me on the go. Also, just the older I get, the fucking lazier I am, and I don't want to get up and grab my boxes and put them in and everything like that. So to me, I'm leaning a little bit more digital, but I do know that bringing up the difference in price between physical and digital. There is no such distinction, it seems, in the US. However, in Europe, the European prices, there is a difference. It is 90 euro for the game physically and 80 for the digital version. So it's interesting. There has been no such distinction on the website for the US. Maybe they'll change that. There has been obviously a ton of blowback, as we talked about. Everybody's saying to drop the price. But as we will also talk about at the end, there is very much a possibility that the price of the system could go up, right? So we'll have to get to that in a second. I know one last thing I wanted to bring up, and then I'll get to you, Summer, if you had anything you wanted to say about pricing. But in one of the basically today, we're recording this on a Monday, and basically the embargo of all the interviews that like Doug Bowser, Nate Bildorf, and Bill Trinan all did with people, that all kind of came out today in a big deluge of news. We'll be getting into a lot of that here. But one of the things that Doug Bowser said was that they're looking at kind of I forget exactly the word he used, but it was like variable pricing structures, and that there is no baseline or there is no standard price that they're looking at for games here. So I think one of the things that he talked about was like the length of time that you can have with that experience. Something you go back to a lot would make a game more expensive. That's maybe why we see Mario Kart at 80 and Donkey Kong at 70. I think that kind of opens a can of worms, and I don't know. We've had the kind of conversation on this podcast a lot, like, does game length justify price? And it's kind of hard to really say that, but it sounds a little bit like that's what Nintendo themselves are saying in some ways. Summer, did you have any thoughts on the pricing of the system or games here?
Yeah. At least one thing I noticed was, a week before all of the pricing information came out, we did at least have another Nintendo Direct that told us that we're going to soon have what they're calling game lending within families. I do think that the pricing is going to probably re-encourage people to be more conscientious just of their spending habits in general. It's kind of an opportunity to community build, I suppose. I'm not saying that Nintendo is forcing us to build community. I guess however it happens, like, great. But like, be in somebody's family, game share with them. I think you have to I think the way that it works is that you do actually have to lend it to someone. Like, you have to go in and lend it to someone, which means like a conversation has to happen between you and another person. And I think some Nintendo fans like need that. So like, let's go.
That's a good way to look at it. I know I don't want to be a Nintendo cuck here, but
yeah,
$10 for Welcome Tour. I might be picking that up.
Oh, I'm on the other end of that, I think.
Are you like, you're out of principle, you're not going to pick it up?
Not even out of principle, but $10 still is a lot to me for something like this, I think. I think I need to hear like rave reviews about it. Otherwise, I'm still kind of on the side of like, I'm going to experience all of the features through the games I want to play.
Well, you guys can play my copy then. But we'll go ahead and move on here to kind of a rapid Switch 2 news roundup here. Like I said, so much information has been coming out. I think I'm just going to list a lot of these here, and then we can talk about which ones we actually want to break down, if that works for you guys. But we've been hearing lots of news. NVIDIA did an interview recently where they actually confirmed, first of all, they said that the Switch 2 is 10 times as powerful as the original Switch. I would be wary of that. That seems like a little bit of you could kind of compute that however you want. But it does seem significantly more powerful, and a lot of third-party partners are saying as much. They did confirm that DLSS and ray tracing are all part of the system. So a Nintendo Switch with ray tracing is something I never really thought I would see. So that's interesting to see. There's a few things that we know are not coming to Switch 2 that have been confirmed in some of these interviews. One of them is that the controllers will not have Hall effect sticks. We can get into that, but there will be no achievements on Switch 2, which I know is disappointing to some people. The top USB-C port is confirmed to not have video out. There will be no music in the eShop. And a couple other things to talk about here is that the game sharing, as we talked about, there's the kind of lending of cartridges and virtual game cards to people, but there's also this sort of game sharing streaming situation that seems like it's kind of interesting and legit and kind of on a game by game basis. Something I thought was cool was that a lot of the game controller mapping that you can do at the system level, you can now do on a per game basis, very much like the Steam Deck. So that's going to be really helpful for controller remapping. Some game sizes were revealed. Hori announced a Piranha Plant USB-C camera. Lots of stuff here to talk about. Is any of this stuff stick out to any of you guys?
For me, if the sticks mean I don't have to constantly replace Joy-Con thumbsticks, I'm all for it. I mean, it's just I've had to replace them so many times on so many different Joy-Cons that it's anything that gets that gone is a win for me.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people were hoping for Hall effect, right? Because that's basically using a magnet to track how the sticks actually work. It's now said that it won't have that, but they kind of avoided questions about stick drift, right? It's hard at this point to say if there will be stick drift, right? Because it's like the system isn't out. It's like wear and tear is not really where it's going to be. But I wonder if like the magnets in the system, like the way that the Joy-Cons connect, maybe would mess the Hall effect sensors. Do you guys think that that's possible?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I really don't know. Like, I just, like Dustin was saying, I mean, if I've had to send my Joy-Cons off twice to get repaired, the first time was just one, and then the second time was both. And I refuse to buy a second pair of Joy-Cons. Like, I just refuse. So I'm like, as long as they fix that, I kind of don't care about anything else. That is the biggest problem with the first gen. But yeah, I don't know. Out of all this too, that Piranha Plant USB-C camera is so legit that you would have. I'm so surprised Nintendo Whimsy is dead, y'all. The Whimsy has gone to Ori, not Nintendo. Like, can we just talk about that for a second? Like, I was just like, man, this is something I would love to have seen. It kind of reminded me of something you might even get off Etsy from like a third-party seller who like 3D prints everything, but it's a legit camera. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's actually got, it's like at the bottom of the stem of the Piranha Plant is a USB-C jack there itself. And then it goes into like a pipe, right? That then has like a cable coming out, but it seems like you could just stick the actual Piranha Plant on the top of your Switch, like in that top USB-C port, which
great.
That's kind of cute.
I think even better, I don't know if you noticed this, instead of a lens cap, you close the mouth.
Oh, right.
It's so good. That alone.
That's just peak design. I mean, like
surprising.
Like function and like design that combines function and aesthetic. Like, let's go. Yeah. Love it.
I think I was a little disappointed to hear that the top USB-C doesn't support video output. I can't say I'm like surprised because I'm sure that piece of hardware does come with an extra cost. However, I was still I was hopeful to eventually get some sort of DS component to this. Like, I think they can figure out how to map it onto the screen to where it works, but I just really wanted another 2-screen setup, and I don't see it happening.
You could still you could always turn the Switch upside down, and because we said those controllers will connect either way, right? Apparently those will work.
I just don't think that's what Nintendo would do officially. I'm sure someone like Genki or something like that will figure out how to do that. Like, I believe someone will figure this out. But the fact that it's like not going to be a first party Nintendo branded thing kind of makes me wary. And then also, like, I saw people talking in the Discord about maybe potentially putting it on its side and having the screens on top and on bottom like that if the Switch is vertical, which again, I don't see Nintendo doing any sort of official adapter for that. But
like a flip grip style thing, you mean?
Yeah, make it flip grip compatible, but I just don't see them doing that officially. So that did kind of put a little damper because I'm a DS diehard. A lot of my favorite games were on the original Nintendo DS, and would love to have a Nintendo Classics DS edition, which I think will still happen. I just don't think it'll have the extra screen like I really wanted. But
yeah. I think that would be pretty unwieldy to have a big 2-screen Switch situation anyway. I think the Tate mode is probably the better way to do DS if they ever do end up doing that. There's some interesting stuff in here. Summer, was there anything on this list that kind of stood out to you?
I don't know that it stood out exactly, but I just want to talk about the fact that there's no achievements, because like that's showing that Nintendo is just not interested in going the same way as Xbox and PlayStation with that. They're still kind of doing it in their own way, just not game by game with platinum points. You know, you can get platinum points, which is like still a currency that you can use on real stuff. I can't do that with my achievements on Xbox. So
that's true. The Zelda app for NSO on phones also kind of has achievements as well. So it's interesting that they've added them in for that game, but not really system wide, right?
Yeah. So it's still, I would say that's still self-contained within that game, right?
Totally.
Because the app is an add-on to the game itself, technically, which, like, kind of going off of what Jordan was saying with like the 2-screen thing, I think anything that they're going to want to do with 2 screens and developers want to do with 2 screens, they're not going to do with phones. As soon as we saw that with Zelda, I was like, oh, this is what they wanted to do with the Wii U. And now they figured out they can do it with the phone, which sucks because like you want to be doing other thing on phone, but now this is them getting you to do everything with Nintendo and not on phone. So
that's
like
true.
there's just like our full attention.
Yeah, we can move on. I guess just one last thing on the game sizes. It does seem like Nintendo is still trying to keep these games pretty small. I think the biggest game that they've shown so far is Mario Kart, which I think was maxed out at like 20 or 30 gig, something like that. And that seems like a really big game. So the fact that that is like around that size, and with the kind of 256 gig internal memory of the Switch 2, hopefully you won't be needing micro SD cards for a while. It does seem that those micro SD cards, which we didn't really talk about in last week's episode, but you know, regular micro SD cards are not going to work on the Switch 2 because of the increased game loading speed, right? So it's actually a certain kind of micro SD card called micro SD Express that does need to be used on the Switch 2. These are much more expensive than micro SD cards, sadly. And it does seem that they are sold out almost everywhere with the announcement of the Switch 2. It doesn't seem like you're going to need them right away. You know, I mean, unless you're going to be loading up on Cyberpunk and big third-party games like on launch here, and you're buying every game that's available for Switch 2. But, you know, I think a lot of people are going to want to bring their Switch 1 libraries over, and I think that that hard drive is going to kind of get filled up pretty quickly. If nothing else, though, it kind of feels to me that, you know, for all the complaining about the price and for all the hemming and hawing about whether people are going to be picking up the system online, the proof is kind of in the pudding. If these very specific micro SD cards are being sold out everywhere, that maybe the demand for this console is pretty high. Did you guys notice this? Is any of you trying to get one of these SD cards? No, I'm getting lots of no's.
Nah.
No, in fact, it was, seeing that it was part of our show discussion point. But that was my first thought was oh, okay, I guess the demand for the Switch 2 still actually is relatively high if the Express card is already sold out and people are just being loud online.
And when they get back in stock on Amazon too, they're gone within minutes. They sell out really, really quickly.
People are probably trying to get ahead of them, jumping up in price even more, I'm sure as well.
Yeah, potentially. Cool. Well, we'll go ahead and move on real quickly. A couple last things here. The Switch 2 edition games, and actually I think many just Switch 2 games in general are going to be utilizing something called game key cards. And that is essentially where you buy a cartridge and it will come with a physical cartridge, but the game will all be downloadable. So there was a lot of confusion about Switch 2 edition games being Switch 1 games in the box with a downloadable code. That doesn't seem to be the case from a lot of the interviews that have been coming out today. It does seem like those will be, the Switch 2 upgrades will all be included on the Switch 2 cart. But there will be full games that release that don't have anything on the cart. And the cartridge itself is just kind of a form of DRM to let you play on the console. That does seem that then you can sell those carts and then you can then download on a console that you sell it to. Is that what you guys are taking away from this announcement?
It's confirmed that the license is not tied to the account that downloads it first?
Right. That's what these game key cards are. So like when you buy a physical copy of the game,
wow,
it's basically tied to that card. Right?
Interesting. Okay. So, okay.
I guess the only, this has sort of existed already, not on Switch, but with other systems. I mean, I know Elden Ring for Xbox was the same way. It's just a disc with a key on it. There's no game on it.
Gotcha.
But I'm unsure, I guess, to Summer's question as to whether or not that was somehow tied now to my Xbox Live account or to my original System X or Series X. Because
that's like my first red flag about it is, this is their way of getting physical games to be unsellable, to not let you be able to borrow them and to encourage digital sales, because now you can have game lending with digital games as opposed to like, so I'm unclear. I don't actually know if that's the case. I also sorry to be the voice of the hillbilly, but again, this isolates people in rural areas that don't have as great internet. Nintendo is still one of the few more accessible game producers that not every single game needed a day one patch, or it was still playable without the day one patch. You could still play whatever was available without having to connect to the internet. That's like the point of a digital or a physical game, is that you can play it without having to connect to the internet. And rural communities are about to get even less support in the next few months. So like things like accessible internet. So that just that part rings out. Like obviously everybody should have internet, but that's still not the case. And those people get even more isolated through something like this.
Well, if everybody has Elon Musk's Starlink, then nobody has to worry about that.
My parents have it and it's the best internet that they can have, which is the only reason that they do have it. And it's still not the best thing in the world. Like still, yeah.
Dustin, like as somebody who is a physical game collector, as you said, and prefers to buy physical games, is it important for you to have the game on the cartridge, or is it more important that you just have something that you're able to resell if you want to?
I mean, here's the thing, right? In this sort of theoretical world, I might tell my wife that maybe one day I'll resell these, but in reality, I never will, right? So it's one of those things where, like, you convince yourself that there's this secondary value in it. But for me personally, I still just have this nostalgia for a thing to hold in my hands, and is to your point earlier, when we travel, it does suck having to bring a bunch of game cards, but I still love doing it. And I like the fact that the kids, they kind of do it and, it's a thing. And, they want to play Smash on, their friends. So they just grab the thing and they go play Smash, and that's fine. And I sort of love that. But if it becomes this sort of just a key card, I sort of don't love that as much. And if there are these kind of real price implications, which there may be,
that's true.
I don't know that I'm willing to pay an extra 10 or 20 bucks.
That's right.
I'm not willing to pay 20, maybe 10, probably 5, but it's so it comes to a pricing decision for me. And if it's
totally,
it's something that I am willing to lose, but I don't want to.
I think the real question that's been failed to be addressed is, are these game key cards going to still taste as bad as the Switch cartridges?
That actually was revealed today.
You're
I'm
kidding.
Not even joking. In one of the interviews, somebody asked if the Switch 2 cartridges will still taste bad, and the answer was yes. We're trying to make these things as unswallowable as possible.
Let's go.
With the idea being that kids would spit them out as soon as they tasted them. So whenever the Switch 2 comes out, we're going to be doing a tasting stream where we see which cartridges taste the best. I'll be looking at a lot of those.
Kudos to the journalist that thought to ask that question. I'm actually really glad. Yeah.
David, your lawyer advised me to advise you not to say that you're going to eat anything else on camera. So
that's one of the many things that the episode 301 through 600 will have to portend with. But let's go ahead and move on right now. Lots of hands-on impressions have been happening this week. Kind of alongside the Treehouse events that were happening, the in-person Nintendo Switch 2 experience has started in New York. A lot of content creators were able to come out and shoot a lot of stuff, as well as people that were able to get in through the raffle. So I think the Dallas event is coming up soon as well, and then the LA one as well. Several other countries are about to all have these. So people are getting hands-on with the Switch 2 right now. A couple of interesting things came out of this that I thought was worth talking about. Cyberpunk 2077 apparently looks really good on the console. Not super surprising because they made kind of a Steam Deck version for handheld PCs. I'm sure that's sort of a port of that. But one of the exciting things to hear about that was that this port for the Switch 2 only took them 7 weeks to create. So the fact that they've already got something that's looking pretty good on Switch 2 after 7 weeks is pretty impressive. Sounds like the quality mode of this game is going to be trying to hit 30 frames per second, and performance mode will be aiming for 40 frames per second on the Switch. So with a 120 hertz screen, you can kind of do interesting frame per second intervals there. And I think 40 frames per second is something that I'd love to see a lot of third-party games try to hit as we're making the most of the Switch 2's LCD screen. Apparently, the system feels pretty sturdy. The magnets, that was something that I was like, I'm really hoping to hear this from a non-Nintendo employee, like how this thing actually feels in the hand, because my Switch does a lot of creaking with the rails, but it really sounds like this thing is going to be pretty sturdy with the electromagnets, so that's really good to hear. And then one last takeaway is that the developers of Donkey Kong Bonanza, which everybody sort of assumed was the Super Mario Odyssey team, the Tokyo Nintendo EPD studio, it's still unknown. Nintendo's being cagey about it, as Nintendo likes to do. They haven't been saying who is actually in charge of this game, how long it's been in development, anything like that. I think the actual official word was you'll have to wait to see in the credits who developed this game. So any takeaways from some of the hands-on impressions we've been seeing this week?
Feels like a adult system for adult gamers. Now, I don't know. Just like the sturdier thing is like exactly what I was like looking for out of an upgrade. Like I still have a launch Switch, so I've been holding out for so long, and just to hear that it feels sturdier, like if I can get a better kickstand, like I can slide my Joy-Cons off without having to press the button, so like if the Joy-Cons can kind of stick on there a little bit better, like I'm pretty easy, honestly, because the form factor of the Switch, I know some people have had issues with it, but it didn't really bother me personally. I got small baby hands, but it's just like I just want something that like this is pretty much the iterative upgrade I was looking for. So that it's nice to hear other people say that it feels sturdy, because it's really all I wanted. An upgraded performance, which it obviously has if Cyberpunk's running on it. Though Cyberpunk is a 5-year-old game now. So, right? Am I crazy? 2020?
Sure, yeah. I mean, the Phantom Liberty, is newer, obviously, and I think the game has gotten tons of upgrades over the course of that time. It does seem like we're getting the ultimate edition of the game on the Switch, which, interestingly enough, on Steam goes for about $85 altogether with Phantom Liberty and everything else. So seems like there's a little bit of price parity. I would expect this to be an $80 package as well when it comes out with Phantom Liberty. We'll have to see what the pricing is going to be there, but that's definitely interesting. If nobody has anything else there, we'll move on in the sake of time to the one bit of Nintendo Switch news that is not Switch 2 related. And that is that there was a giant leak of a dev kit of the original Switch that just came out online. Some pretty interesting stuff in here, including an early build of a Bandai Namco developed Ridge Racer game for the Switch that never came out, a couple other early builds of games as well, and also a very, very early dev build of the game that Retro Studios was working on post Tropical Freeze and pre Metroid Prime 4. This has been talked about at length as to what this game could be. There were lots of rumors that it was a music-based game, and it does indeed seem that that is the case. I don't know that we'll show footage of this right now, unless you are already, Summer.
I switched over back from the footage as soon as you said that.
Very good. I just want to make sure that we don't get struck by anything here. It's not hard to find. Definitely go out and check it out if you are interested in it, but I don't think it's being hosted on YouTube right now. But it does seem like this game is called Project Harmony. It looks like sort of like Cameo, that Xbox game that was out a while ago. It seemed like you played as this female protagonist, and there were lots of mounts that you could ride around as a kind of third-person 3D platformer. This had been rumored for a long time. It seems like this is confirmation. Did you guys check any of this out? And what do you guys think about this leak of this retro game?
I watched it. It's really early. So like people were talking about, like it was pretty far along in development. And from what I could see, the footage is more of like a demo. Before the art assets are finalized or levels are finalized. So you can kind of see a concept of what this is. And it was kind of giving me some Star Fox Adventure vibes, pretty heavy, which it was kind of interesting. Any peek into what Retro has been working on for the past decade is always going to be fascinating to me. I keep following all the Did You Know gaming videos and all that stuff just about unrealized projects over there. So it's always fascinating to see what actually was happening. Any peek behind the Nintendo curtain is fascinating, but it's hard to say what this game would have been had it fully finished its development cycle.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of more of a what if and an interesting peek into what could have been than I think something that they'll probably return to. We'll have to see. I think a lot of what I'd also heard about the development of this game is that it was kind of a shit show and that they never really found what they were trying to find in the development of the game, and that Nintendo never really had a ton of confidence in it. So it might be for the best that this was them sort of stumbling their way around. It does seem that, the Bandai Namco developed Ridge Racer prototype here kind of confirms the leak that Bandai Namco was the team working on Metroid Prime 4 before that did go back to Retro. So it's interesting that this one leaked dev kit of the Switch has kind of confirmed all this stuff about both of these companies. But I just thought that was pretty interesting. We'll hopefully have a little chance to look into this a little bit more, find out more about this in the future, and kind of update you guys as we learn more about this leaked prototype. But our last bit of news here will kind of lead us into the main topic. And that's just that it was revealed in kind of an unprecedented move from one of Nintendo's PR studios that the pre-orders for the Nintendo Switch are going to be delayed. Who knows for how long in the United States due to the Trump administration's passing of many tariffs, lots of which are affecting Japan, China, Vietnam, where most of these systems and Nintendo's products in general are manufactured. Let's maybe hold some of that conversation here until the main topic, but that's an interesting thing that we've never really seen happen before. And I'm sure we're going to be breaking all of that down here with you, Dustin, a professor of economics, right after this break. And we are back. We are here today for the main topic to talk all about the Trump tariffs that have just gone into effect and what that might mean for the future of the Nintendo Switch 2, the pricing of the console itself, maybe some of the physical games. Just in general, there's a lot of unknowns. And like we said right before the break, this is kind of the first time this has ever happened in the history of Nintendo, where they've come out, they had a presentation, and then 2 days later, the world changed, right? It was actually interesting seeing some of the interviews that kind of released from embargo today. I think Doug Bowser did an interview on like CNBC, and he did one on NPR. And both of those are like, Trump is in the Rose Garden right now talking about tariffs. So he was kind of caught off guard in the moment. It's really interesting to break it all down. But that's why we have you here, Dustin. As we said at the top of the show, you are a professor of economics at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. So glad to have you on. I guess before we get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your background, and sort of, I understand you're a gamer as well.
Yeah, I mean, so, it's interesting. I started off in undergrad as an engineer, right? So I still have that sort of weird tech side and sort of interest in all things kind of gaming and tech and in that area. Transitioned into economics as a graduate student. Got a PhD in economics here in Tennessee at the Middle Tennessee State. And I'm an industrial organization and labor economist by training. So I do have a little bit to say on this. I'm not a trade economist, so to speak, but industrial organization covers a lot of these topics in a lot of these areas. So yeah, I mean, it's great to be able to come on and have this conversation. And if I get too deep in the weeds, just start waving your hands wildly, and I'll step back a little bit.
I think we brought you on so we could go deep on this because I think a lot of people are really interested in learning more about it.
So, I mean, I think the sort of place to start is just kind of tariffs in general, right? Tariffs are just, by definition, it is a tax, right? I mean, you could just substitute the word tax in for tariff anytime you say it. It's just tax over a certain type of good. And, it's interesting to kind of think about, I've been teaching principles of economics for over a decade now. And it's one of those things where we always covered it. It was a topic that we covered. But I mean, this has been sort of, we've known the impacts of this since, the 1750s when Richard Cantillon, a French economist, started talking about it. And then Adam Smith talked about it. And then, David Ricardo talked about it. This has been kind of settled science for centuries now. And, you'll hear a lot about, we used to do tariffs all the time, but that was more of a sort of pragmatic exercise where it's not that tariffs were ever good. We've sort of always known they weren't. It's just as a practical matter, that was really the only way that a country could collect taxes easily in the 1800s. It just, taxes didn't work that way. So, just as a thought exercise, come up with another tax that has ever, happened. It by definition will make things more expensive. I think one of the things that I keep going back to in a lot of these conversations are like, well, maybe the taxes or maybe the tariffs will go away soon, right? We initially had the Canadian and Mexican tariffs, and then they went away after 2 days, and they came back after a month. And I'm kind of always reminded of the meme, the clown makeup meme, right? Where you start off and it's like, during the election season was like, well, he's talking about tariffs, but he won't actually do it. Right. And it was like, well, he'll do it, but they'll be targeted. It's like, well, they won't be targeted, but they'll be small. And now it's just like, they're not targeted, they're not small, but maybe they'll go away sometime. And then, true. Every single day he's just doubling down. I'm not getting rid of them. He said today that it might take 2 years for some of these things to kind of work themselves out. It's crazy. And so, right. If we're looking for these, rationale behind any of it, like it's not there. Right. And this is not, not a political podcast. I mean, I have a feeling right now, a lot of people have leanings, but, tariffs didn't make sense when George W. Bush did some of them, when Barack Obama did some of them, when Trump did them the first time, when Biden didn't get rid of them, and now when they're even bigger today. They've never made sense.
Sure. And I think just to jump in real quick there, I think that no, it's okay. No, those are all really great points. I just kind of wanted to touch on the idea of politics in kind of this moment now, because that's been something that I've been noticing is that it's like, it's like the Nintendo subreddits and the gaming subreddits right now, which are very usually apolitical. They have a no politics rule. That's kind of out the window now, right? It's like there's not really any way you can discuss the very real reality of what's happening within. And this is just one part of industry and products here in the US that are going to be affected by this. We're obviously talking about it because we're a Nintendo podcast and it's very much in the news right now. But it's like kind of impossible to not be political when talking about these things because they are inherently political in and of themselves. So I just found that kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is one of these things where, the broader economy is going to leak into this too, right? I mean, we can talk about, development costs and things like that. We think about the not just the development of the Switch console itself, but ongoing game development, ongoing product development. Companies don't pay for this out of pocket. It's not. Or I should say they do pay for it, but it's not, they don't have piles of cash that they're paying with it. They take loans out. They kind of have these development costs that are spread out over time. This is going to impact their ability to get loans for these types of things. It's going to retard development over time. It's going to slow down, we're talking about Switch 2 right now, but whatever comes next, it's going to delay those things. And it's going to make it just harder for them to do business. We can talk about how the release time is affected by this. I've been reading a lot about, did this initial $450 price point? I mean, we've talked about price points a little bit, but for you guys, was $450? Was that surprising? I mean, did you all expect it to be lower?
I definitely expected it to be lower. I thought it was going to be in the 400 range, but kind of in the buildup, my gut was ready for 500. Because I was just like, dude, this tariff talk ain't slowing down. And I know that's going to have a very real effect on where these consoles are manufactured and like where they're getting shipped out of is where they're going to be tariffed. So I was like, I was really preparing myself for a $500 console. And I was like, that's crazy. And at the same time, though, I'm like, well, Nintendo kind of dragged their feet releasing this system. And they kind of, I don't know if it was because of the tariffs. I don't think it was, but it's just, that kind of ended up being a negative thing for them. Because I'm thinking like, dude, honestly, the PS6 and whatever, if Xbox makes another one, those are probably going to be $700 consoles now. Like
just due to regular inflation even.
Yes. Yeah. So, that 450 price point, I was like, I don't love it, but I'm not like, as surprised, I think, as some other gamers were.
Yeah. It was interesting. In one of the many interviews with Doug Bowser that we talked about the drop today, he was asked if the $450 price point was already due to them anticipating these tariffs. He kind of pretty much straight up said no. I wouldn't expect him to say any other answer there. I mean, he was a very CEO of Nintendo of America or president of Nintendo of America thing to say of like, we think that it's, the new feature set and blah, 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 blah. It makes it worth 450. I sort of don't believe that. I feel like to them, they thought that like China would get tariffed. They thought maybe Japan would get tariffed. I don't know that they expected Vietnam to get tariffed because I think they moved a lot of their production to Vietnam for that particular reason, in fact. So when Doug Bowser says something like that, that reads to me like a little bit of, he's trying to cover his ass. But that does kind of beg the question, I suppose. And there's probably more things we could talk about here, but I think that begs the question of like, what's going to happen in the US here? Because we know that the foreign markets, all their pre-orders, like in the UK, pre-orders are live now. You can, I've seen a lot of people online, they already have their Switch 2s pre-ordered. There's no price increase there whatsoever. But do we think that there's a real possibility that with like a, 45% tariff on products from Vietnam, that we could see a price increase from the already pretty expensive $450 console?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's interesting to think about, right? So the regular Switch has been $300 since launch, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that still the case? And it still is $300.
The OLED is $350.
OLED's $350.
But yeah, the V1 is $300.
Yeah, and so if we just kind of just call it a 30% tariff, because it's sort of unclear if it's Vietnam, China, Japan, where these things are coming from, but let's call it 30. A 450 console all of a sudden now is, if you're thinking about the money that Nintendo would have to charge pre-tariff, they would be making less. I mean, just doing the back of the envelope math, that's something like $340. So Nintendo would somehow have to maintain that 450 price. They'd be making less than what an OLED they'd be making on it. So it seems as if if they haven't built in that into their pricing model, and if we're to believe that, I don't know. That makes it tough for them to keep that price point 450. I mean, it almost seems like it has to go up. To the kind of economics of this, we could look at sort of the basic supply and demand models that a lot of people know, a lot of people talk about. But one thing that you got to be careful about is that this isn't really a standard market, right? So, I just bought vacuum filters today. And when you buy vacuum filters, there are 8 million companies on Amazon with insano names, and you're just shopping for a price point, right? And so when we think about competition, a lot of times we think about competition on price. And there are certainly markets for that, kind of basic everyday goods that are all uniform. But the type of competition that Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft are engaging in is what generally we refer to as Stackelberg competition. And it's not a competition on pricing, it's a competition on market share, right? So these firms are not competing for sort of profitability based on pricing. They are counting on capturing market share and then using that toward profitability. And so my guess is that the biggest concern right now for Nintendo, and again, I don't have any more inside information than anybody else, but they're worried about that market share. And they're worried about, like, right now, we are sort of a first mover toward this next generation of consoles right now. And we need to capture as much market share as we can right now. And what is problematic is they've probably front loaded, I would guess, inventories here in the United States. My guess is there's a ton of inventory sitting here in the United States. They got in before tariffs happened. It seemed as though I was looking at some Bloomberg articles that they upped production. They probably try to get it here quickly. A lot of auto manufacturers did the same thing.
Do you think you're saying they probably did that in anticipation of these tariffs coming up?
Correct. If you go through a lot of the warehousing data that's come out since the election, since November, warehousing has gone up tremendously. That is, all these companies they're at all-time highs. All the reports are that inventories have been growing at an increasing rate. So not only are they growing, but they're growing faster every month. Up until this most recent month. And so I would be astonished if Nintendo wasn't already trying to front load inventories here in the United States in anticipation of these tariffs. But I think for everybody, seemingly, the level that these tariffs happened at, and to your point earlier, the fact that they are affecting countries like Vietnam as well, I think caught everybody off guard. And so, if I had to guess, the reason they pull the delaying the pre-orders, is that they're trying to sort of figure out how to go through the summer with the stock that's here and what that next wave of shipments looks like. Right? They're not going to want to increase price, but can they sort of hold us off with the inventory that exists now? That would be my guess. Again, yeah.
Do you think that's the kind of like math that they're scrambling right now to do before they kind of are able to open up the pre-orders to retailers, I suppose?
I really think that's what it is. I think it is a stock thing. I think they're going to have some limited number that they can guarantee at a certain price. They're trying to figure out the math behind look, can we continue this console at this price? As we talked about earlier with the games, can maybe they've had some thoughts about, digital game prices being at a certain thing. Maybe maybe they're willing to sort of eat tighter margins on console, knowing that perhaps they can get, kind of $80 games out.
That's a great point. I bet you anything they're kicking themselves for not going digital only this entire generation. I bet they're like, oh man, we had the opportunity and we didn't do it, right? But no, sorry, go ahead.
No, and sorry, I feel like I'm getting way too in the weeds about the stuff that I do. But I mean, if you think about like the progress of a system, right? So think back to like put yourselves in, the Wayback Machine and go back to 7 years ago when we, released Switch 1 at $300, right? The cost of producing that has gone down tremendously over time, right? You've got initial development costs. The margins were much tighter. I know you all look at the financials from time to time. I went back through and looked at some old ones, and the margins were sort of, it's hard to define it exactly, but call it 10 to 15% that first year or so of Switch 1. If you look at margins today, they're much, much higher on that console, right? Obviously, those screens are less expensive. The chipsets are less expensive. All those things kind of go down over time. So, you're sort of willing to absorb those tight margins early on, but Nintendo historically has not been willing to deal with negative margins.
Yeah, that was something I was going to bring up. I think that's something that really sets them apart from a lot of the other players in this industry, is that it's like Sony and Microsoft have historically always taken a loss on their consoles, which is funny because they don't sell anywhere near the number of games that Nintendo does, right? So the fact that Nintendo has always gone cheap with those margins and then still is like by far and away the top seller. Yeah. I mean, that I don't know if you think that, and I'm not sure like how much you know Nintendo's kind of like normal way of selling things, but it's like, I'm like curious if they would ever be willing to sell at a loss, right? Because they've historically never done that before.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to me, and I think I worry a little bit about Nintendo. I mean, obviously you all do too. I have a certain love for Nintendo that I like my Xbox, I like PlayStation, but I sort of don't love them. They're appliances that I play games on, but I don't have a sort of visceral.
You have a parasocial relationship with Nintendo.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And so I sort of worry about where this places them right now, because and I want to hear your thoughts about this, because this isn't a conversation I normally get to have, and you guys are sort of experts. But looking back on the history of sort of Nintendo consoles, there's this wave of innovation and progression. What I mean by that is like NES seemed like innovation. SNES was the progression. 64 was innovation, right? That felt new and different. GameCube was the sort of progression of that.
We're trying to catch back up with the other guys.
Yeah, and then we felt totally new and different, right? That was innovation. That was crazy, right? Wii U was progression, right? Switch, crazy innovation. It was new, it was different. Switch 2, we're getting progression again, right? This still feels like a Switch to me. It doesn't feel like that disconnect between the sort of Wii generations and Switch did. I don't know. How do you all feel about that? Because it makes me worried to a certain degree that without that innovation that we might, and all these pricing issues, like, do we start to see a lag and a fall off? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be a Wii and a Wii U situation, but I do think it's going to be a DS and a 3DS situation.
That's a good thing, though.
Well, the 3DS out the gate didn't perform very well. It was priced high. And then they eventually released all these things for like the Founders Program or whatever that was called. Where
the Ambassador Program. Yeah.
Ambassador Program. So I think it's going to be something more similar to that, where it's just like, they're going to have killer apps and people are going to want to buy it and everything like that. But I think it's just all these factors are going to add up into something a little bit more problematic. Like it really just depends, and we don't really know, but like how much stock did they build up in the past few months? And is that why they delayed the system? Because they knew these tariffs were coming, and they're like, how much can we produce? How long can we put this off? How much can we build up in our warehouses before we actually have to just push this thing out into the world? But I don't think it's going to be quite the flop of the Wii U. Only for the fact that this is still the most competitively priced mobile game console on the market, and you got Nintendo properties. Like, and I think that sells on its own.
You're saying compared to like, say, a ROG Ally X or something like that, which is often compared to.
Yeah,
totally.
It does get a little tiresome hearing Dude Bros try to say like, the Steam Deck and Yuzu, the Steam Deck and Yuzu. The Steam Deck and Yuzu is not a language that normal consumers understand.
Yeah.
Right.
Normal consumers know what a Switch is. They know what Nintendo is. They know that they need a Nintendo to play Nintendo games. So they will buy a Nintendo. They are not thinking about the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is for gamers. They're not thinking about emulating Switch games on another piece of hardware. So like from that perspective, I don't know how much that sells at launch. Jordan, I hear what you're saying. I think, and I was already kind of thinking that a little bit about like the ambassadors program, I think is what it was called for people who bought it at launch, that David cheated the system with and managed to
That's true. Yeah, I did buy my 3DS. I bought my 3DS right on the end where it already had a price drop at Walmart, but I still got in on the ambassador program.
And I bought it at launch. So I got the ambassadors program, but I'm like already battling this with myself of like, I hope they do something like the ambassadors program again, because I'm probably going to buy the Switch too, and they're probably going to decrease the price after I buy it.
Well, there's a lot to say with that, and there's actually so much we could talk about here. But I think that one of the main things with the 3DS situation in general, which of course I think that is the obvious thing to jump to here, because I think it was 200. What was it, 280 or something when it launched? It was something
Maybe it was
ridiculously
250.
expensive. It was 250? Yeah, and then they brought it down to 170. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, something like that. It was a massive price drop, right? And I think that something that we need to bring into account there is the makeup of Nintendo at that time, right? Nintendo at that time, NCL in Japan, the CEO was Satoru Iwata. And Iwata was notoriously a pro-consumer, pro-gamer head of the company, right? He is the guy who famously, when the Wii U flopped, cut his own salary in half instead of letting go of any of his employees. He was the one, he came out and personally apologized for the 3DS being too expensive, brought the price down. This is also the era of Reggie Fils-Aimé heading up Nintendo of America, who famously fought for the Wii to have the pack-in game of Wii Sports. That was not a game that they had in Japan as a pack-in. That you had to buy that game in Japan, right? So there was a very we need to get people on our side group of people heading this entire company that you don't really see now. I think that we're coming off right now of a very self-assured and we're the leader of the pack Nintendo. They have not wanted for anything this entire Nintendo Switch generation. They have blasted every other console pretty much out of the water in terms of console sales, in terms of game sales, so much so that we don't even really talk about them when we talk about the games industry. They're kind of just in their own echelon, right? So I'm curious if we would see anything like that with the current leadership at Nintendo, right? If anything, I kind of see it not as because I'm kind of talking in circles here, but it's when I look at the anger of a lot of the Nintendo fans that were already screaming drop the price before the Trump tariffs were ever even announced. It's I don't know how much they're going to be willing to push it, push the good graces that they have. And I worry that, if they pass off the losses that they would incur from the tariffs to the consumers, and this thing comes out at $650, $700, I think the number of people that were already super pissed, I think they're not going to touch this thing, right? I mean, I don't know. The only other way I could see this maybe going is maybe they have a founder's price or an introductory price of, the thing is going to be 450, 500 until we run through our stock, right? Of this initial batch that's already here. And then any new shipments coming from abroad, they get the price bump, right? Which is quite literally the opposite of what we saw with the 3DS, right? So there's so many variables and so many ways that they could do this. And it's really, really hard to kind of pick the lane they're going to go this time because, Nintendo, for as much as we like to find patterns in what they do, they are a very, unpredictable company, and they are hard to kind of pin down in any way. And it's not easy to follow trends like you can with some of these other manufacturers.
I think the one thing I keep coming back to is just the amount that they have in their coffers as they start to become more of a multimedia company. So, I mean, the Switch obviously sold like crazy amounts, and the amount of software they sold was pretty unprecedented. When you even just look at how much a regular game sells on all that's multi-platform versus how much one game sells on Nintendo systems is just night and day. It's really crazy, but I think they have more in their coffers right now than they've ever had. I mean, the Mario movie was $1 billion movie, so it's they have a little bit of wiggle room, and I'm just curious to see how much they're willing to give up to kind of keep the ball rolling. Are they willing to maybe start eating a little bit on the cost of the console because they have so much in their coffers? I don't really know, but I would hope that that amount that they just have in the bank sitting there is used for our consumer good. But like you said, the leadership's different.
Mm-hmm.
And, another thing that we start to see in these sorts of situations is that, maybe they again are willing to sort of eat it on the margins a little bit, but that money has to come from somewhere, right?
Sure.
And it's so is that game development in the future, right? Is this sort of these huge titles that we've been accustomed to? Do they just kind of become fewer and far between, right? Is it think about some of the lag time in the development time for Tears of the Kingdom, games like these big games that are in development for really long times. If that gets pushed just another year or so, just because of costs and things like that, that has at the end of the day, that has a kind of big impact on how we feel about these sales and just overall development. It'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do think, and this is a lot of speculation here, but I think we've talked a lot on the show about how Nintendo often will sit on games for a really long time that are completed and done and in the can and wait to release them. And I really truly think that Nintendo right now is sitting on a cachet of 8 or 9 completely finished games, or at least towards the end of development games that they have just not announced right now. And I think that for them, with what you just said, that is a huge savior for them, right? Because they can potentially wait out some of these tariffs, because like you said, Trump is a fucking maniac, dude. He could change his mind whenever he wants, it is this could, and it's happened throughout this entire administration. It's he keeps towing the line or putting his toe over the line of oh, how far can I get? And kind of being unconstitutional before I get yelled at by the public or whatever, right? And then he pulls back a little bit and then kind of pushes it a little bit more. I feel like the tariffs right now seem like a little bit of a different thing. I think that he's really getting off on the chaos that the world economy is now kind of crashing because of this. I think that he just loves seeing that he's had a huge impact on the world, regardless of what it is. We could get into what that means for a fascist dictatorship in a different episode. But I think that, there is a world in which that these tariffs will go away in 3 months, right? And I'm sure Nintendo is trying to have plan A's, plan B's, and plan C's as far as this is concerned, right? But anyway, back to the games thing. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping all over the place because I started thinking about fascism. But I think that there is a very real possibility, and this kind of goes back to some of what we were saying about Donkey Kong Bonanza and their developers. I think Donkey Kong Bonanza has been done for a long time. I think that this game, they worked on it. I think this is the Mario Odyssey team. I think the reason that we didn't see a 3D Mario game like everybody was anticipating here was because in the last 7 years, they've been working on this Donkey Kong game. They got it done. They know they're releasing it on basically similar architecture to what they already had on the old system, but beefed up like we're seeing with these Nintendo Switch 2 editions. And they're hard at work on that 3D Mario game right now. I think that, we've got an upcoming Rhythm Heaven game from Intelligent Systems. They've also got a Fire Emblem game banked, just like waiting to see release. They're probably also working on a Paper Mario game, or some of those games might even be completed. I think Nintendo's actually in a pretty good position as far as game releases are concerned, in like the kind of the lifeblood of the system as it goes out, to be able to be like, okay, maybe we're not going to release. Like that in 2017, the Switch kind of had a game release every single month. I can see that being changed to like a month and a half, maybe 2 months, maybe even 2.5 months for some of these, a little bit more like a Wii U cadence. I don't think they want to push it too hard, but it's like, if they're trying to wait out some of this stuff and hope that, this narcissist will change his mind when it comes to how he wants to, tax these countries, as we've talked about, I think that they're kind of in a pretty good position as far as that's concerned. But what do you think about that, Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to you all on the sort of expertise of Nintendo and their game development. I'm less optimistic about the tariffs going away quickly. I mean, I just think to some degree, I'm a big believer in when people say something, I believe it, right? And so, Trump over and over again, just in these last, feels like it's been forever, 7 days, right, has just continued to double down that like, oh, the economy just needs to take its medicine. Oh, we need to totally revamp global trade. And, we haven't gotten into this and we don't necessarily need to fully get into it. But the way that they're saying, even Vietnam specifically today, they talked about, they had a call with Vietnam. Vietnam said, we will get rid of every single tariff against the U.S. if you drop the tariffs against us too. And the Trump administration said, no, that's not good enough. They said, you have to get rid of all your other predatory practices. You have to get rid of your value-added tax, which is really just a sale. It's the way we have sales tax here.
Right.
It's just, so they want Vietnam to get rid of all sales taxes within Vietnam. Like it's complete and it's nonsense, total nonsense. So this idea that, these countries are going to be able to even comply with what the administration says, I don't know. I think the one hope is that, you mentioned fascism and dictatorships, but really the interesting thing about this is that the president doesn't really have unilateral power to impose tariffs, which is an interesting wrinkle in all of this, because the sort of first widespread tariffs that a president has done in sort of modern history was super modern history, was George W. Bush, and that was steel and aluminum. And you could sort of make this national security argument then. It was loose, but
was this like a post 9/11 thing? Yeah,
exactly. And then, interestingly, it was really Obama who expanded this when he, instead of just doing aluminum and steel, did tires. And it was a specific response to Korean and Chinese tires. He got rid of them, but it sort of opened this door where future administrations kind of thought, he did it then. That was even a weaker argument than steel and aluminum. But at the end of the day, Congress could have stepped in and said, no, right? This is not national security. Congress has the power of purse. Congress gets to levy taxes, not the president. And it just never got stopped. And it is possible, I'm not holding my breath, but you're starting to hear rumblings of, well, is Congress actually going to step in because maybe the Republicans are like, hey, actually, this might be the thing that gets us not elected in the future. Again, I'm not going to hold my breath, but I think that's the best chance within the next 6 months.
That's really interesting. It is funny that it's like the one thing that's bipartisan is nobody wants the entire economy to crash. Right?
Well, I mean, you would think.
Yeah, you would think. Yeah, the Trump cult does go pretty deep. But again, not to get too political, but we're not really afraid of that on this podcast. But no, that's interesting. I wonder, like, if the midterms would, I think that what's been happening with so much of Trump's administration so far has been trying to push as much through now at a rapid clip before a potential, blue sweep or whatever in the midterms, and he loses Congress and loses, of this kind of complete Republican majority that they have right now. That and the Republican Party is the MAGA party now, right? So it's like it kind of all bends to his whims and wishes, and so. Or anyway, don't have to get too into the weeds on that, but no, that's interesting. It does kind of put a little bit of a timetable on it, though. It'd be interesting to see how it shakes out, just kind of across the country in the next couple weeks. But anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think the only other thing I kind of wanted to kind of touch on was, we're talking about Nintendo specifically, but like, what are the broader implications across not just like the video game market, but electronic markets as a whole? I mean, and just other markets too, man. Like I was at a coffee shop the other day and they were like, I don't think anyone in the US I don't think coffee beans grow in the US.
They don't.
So
except
literally,
for Hawaii.
In Hawaii.
Can't sustain
the amount of
intake.
Yeah. So like literally every cup of coffee is going to go up because none of the beans are produced in the US. And like, just like that ripple effect is really going to be, I don't want to use the word interesting because it's depressing, but it's going to be weird to watch that play out in other game spheres as well. To see, I mean, like Sony and Microsoft are honestly very lucky right now because they have already pushed towards a digital future, and specifically with Game Pass, like I don't think Game Pass is getting a tariff. So you know what I mean? Like that they're able to solidify the margins that they were already making. So it's just I'm really curious to see like how long this lasts, and will that have a broader implication for the next console generation from Sony and Microsoft as well? I don't know.
Yeah, you bring up a good point too about like consumable goods, and as we talked about before, there's been a kind of anticipatory increase in shipping from a lot of these overseas manufacturers because of the kind of looming threat of these tariffs. You can't like pre-ship avocados. You know what I mean? They'll go bad. It's like in coffee and whatever, right? It's like I feel like, groceries are, going to be, grocery products and whatever. Like that's going to be the stuff that's going to be most immediate. And I mean, that's the stuff that also it's like you start to have hungry people and then you start to get really mad, right? And that's like, and that's kind of how a depression starts. And that's kind of how a lot of this stuff can sort of snowball into desperation on a lot of people's parts, right? And so right now we're talking about our treats and our toys, right? And that's kind of like, and it's funny because that's what's gotten a lot of people radicalized. It's like people don't really care about when, other people are less fortunate than them or having hard times. But as soon as your 401k is threatened because the stock market is dropping, or as soon as your treats are getting taken away, then all of a sudden people get, that's what we had just the other day, like the biggest protests here in the United States that we'd seen, this organized protests in a very, very, very long time. There's 100,000 people marching in New York City, so it's like, and a lot of them are older people too, right? Like, I went to the one here in Austin and it was a lot of boomers. It was a lot of Barbaras and Debras, as you could say, right? And so I think getting gamers involved is kind of an interesting thing. That it's like it's almost like we've kind of there's a potential here for this kind of like bizarro alternate flip on Gamergate. I think that there's a lot of people in this space are kind of starting to become very disillusioned. And I think that it's interesting too, when you just look at it from a political perspective, because I think it's, the numbers don't lie. It's like young men in the United States elected Trump, and a lot of those guys are gamers, and a lot of those guys are now going to be seeing like massive price hikes on a lot of the things that they really enjoy. So it's going to be interesting to see if this has any kind of political fallout, from these kind of demographics that have been so supportive of Trump throughout this entire situation. I've been seeing stuff that's just so funny. The kind of people that have been staunch defenders of this administration and kind of, that Gamergate section of the right, trying to kind of like rationalize this in their heads has been like this ballet that has been really entertaining and humorous for me to watch. Like, just being like, well, why don't they just make a game company that makes all their games in the United States? It's like, okay, guy, what's the timetable on this we're talking about right now? So it's just, the reality is, you can't just completely upend the entire global economy and marketplace and have changes happen overnight. It's going to really be a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow.
Video games are one of these things that can kind of, it can span generations. I don't think, boomers are probably the biggest consumers of Nintendo Switch. However, sure. Right. But this is going to, like you said, the sort of young men. I mean, my son he's been talking and saving up. He has been interested in Switch 2 release. Right. And for him, for us, look, at the end of the day, will I maybe just eat the cost and not be happy about it? Perhaps.
I'm doing that with Welcome to It.
Yeah. Right. And so, but, 18-year-old kids, 16-year-old kids with a paper route, eating a $250 extra is not a trivial amount of money. Right. And this is one of those things that's making them take notice of things sort of happening in the world. Like my son has said to me, because I had this conversation about what I'm doing tonight. And I said, I'm going to talk about tariffs and we're going to talk about Switch. And he's like, hey, is this going to make things more expensive? Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. Oh, he was bummed about that. Right. And so like, it's going to get these people involved at an age that's sort of younger. And so I don't know, maybe there's hope for a new generation.
Yeah. If you're looking for an instruction manual that isn't $10 that you want to read, I recommend the Communist Manifesto. It's very cheap. You can find it online for free. You can read it, in about 30 minutes. It's definitely worth it. Sorry, that's as far as I'll say on that. Summer and Jordan, is there anything you guys want to add, or what do you see kind of the direction that Nintendo takes from here? Because I think there's a lot of avenues they could go from here. What do you think is the most likely that we'll see Nintendo do in opening up pre-orders for retailers?
I'm starting to I'm chewing more on the fact that, we've talked a lot about how digital products do have protections. They're not going to be impacted by tariffs. Maybe what they're actually reworking is figuring out more digital inclusions to the Switch. Maybe it does have to go up in price, and or even if it doesn't, maybe they're figuring out what else they're willing to include digitally. Maybe it's copies of games that aren't lendable, that are just like tied to that Switch, kind of like the ambassadors program from the original 3DS. But the more that I sit and think with it, I feel like that is actually maybe a highly likely avenue, so that we see more value in their product, because that's not impacted by tariffs. And that's something that I could see them, like, in the spirit of Nintendo. Yes, it's not quite Iwata, and it's not music in the eShop, but it's something.
Sure. Yeah. I feel you. Well, can we pretty much safely rule out that there will be any kind of price drop? It's like, because it's like, seeing all the blowback, right? I would say, like, man, there's a chance that they kind of renege some of this $80 game situation. Maybe they have some sort of extra bundle, or they realize, like, oh, maybe Welcome Tour would be a nice NSO perk, right? Right. But I think now at this point, I can't see any sort of budging on the price. But it is hard for me to see them raise it right now, like it, as much as I, think like, it's like, yeah, the Iwata years are over. It's like really hard for me with all the, if people weren't so mad about the price, and don't get me wrong, like, there's always going to be sticker shock, and there are always going to be people that are like loud and spamming stuff in chat. People spam Silksong in the chat, so of course they're going to spam drop the price, right? And some of that's just memeing, I'm sure, but it is like legitimately going to be hard in this economy for people to actually make this purchase. But I don't know, I just can't see the price going up on this thing. What do you think, Dustin?
I think again, I think the game here is market share. And so I think the risk that Nintendo runs by increasing price, if they were to increase price in this sort of short to intermediate term, they're going to decrease the number of immediate sales. And maybe that doesn't sort of matter today, but when that will matter is when next generation consoles come from Microsoft and Sony, right? They want a little bit of a head start in market share.
Sure.
And if they don't get that, that sort of is what becomes a long-term problem for them. Is if they sort of increase price now and then can't start to capture some of that back until they can lower prices, which might come in some indeterminate future time, that's tough. And so, strategically, market share is what matters right away. Getting consoles on the market, getting them in people's hands is the sort of most important thing.
Sure.
In an oligopolistic market with three effective firms, and so that's going to be the move. Is however they can get those consoles in people's hands at the lowest sort of reasonable price, and component prices are going to go up. Hey, magnets are getting expensive. We got a lot of new magnets. So
that's true. Not Hall Effect though. Not Hall Effect.
Right. So, I mean, I think that's it, right? I don't think they're going to go crazy with it, but it's unclear how much they'll be able to just eat those prices for too long.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think that we have a Wii U style flop on our hands, but I certainly think that Nintendo was already looking at a pretty tough situation that definitely got tougher. So we'll have to keep you guys engaged and informed as this continues to develop. I mean, there's a very real possibility that by the time this episode comes out, this will all be old news at the rate that everything's been going. But I want to ask you guys now, if you're listening, what do you think? Please leave a comment below and write us on Discord. Leave your thoughts there. And please, let us know what you think, because I think that this could go any distinct way. I want to thank you, Dustin, for your insight on this here. And we're going to go ahead and I think call it there if nobody has anything else. And we're going to move on to the next section of the show, which is the games we've been playing recently. What I've been playing recently has been mostly really Picross for the Game Boy. I'm almost all the way through that, but I'm not going to talk about that here today because that's boring. But I did pick up, I do want to say, Breakout Beyond, which is a game here by Choice Provisions, which was the creator of the Bit Trip series. They have done this kind of Atari redo. Atari's been kind of re-releasing a lot of their old games in this kind of new way. They did this version of Breakout. It's a lot of fun. I really, really recommend it. It makes sense that Choice Provisions is making this because, one of the early Bit Trip games basically was sort of a paddle game that plays on its side. They do the same thing here. It's basically, instead of it being a vertical game where you're bouncing the ball vertically up and down, you're kind of doing it to the side. And as you're going, it sort of comes towards you ever onward, sort of in a Space Invaders sort of way, you could say. The game is very, very fun. It's got a really great aesthetic. It looks really good on my Switch OLED, and I've been playing it on there. So I would definitely recommend Breakout Beyond. It's a really good pooping game. I enjoy playing this on the toilet. And although it is more difficult than I anticipated, Breakout can be pretty hard, but there's a pretty cool mode they have where I think if you press the right, it's like the right shoulder button, it like slows down time. So I've been using that pretty liberally, and it still feels, not like I'm cheating or anything like that, but it's been a lot of fun playing that game. But that's what I've been playing mostly recently.
I'll go next because I am still just playing the same thing. I've just been playing Echoes of Wisdom. I absolutely love this game. This is fantastic. I didn't ever know where they could really go with 2D Zelda. Like, I think it pretty much peaked after the Minish Cap, and I loved Link Between Worlds, but like I was just like, I don't really know what else you can do with this formula, and like this has just completely changed my opinion on like, oh, this is like a future of this series. There's so many different variables of like how you can solve puzzles and unexpected things that you can do, like just weird ways to solve puzzles that I wasn't expecting. And man, so I am right now currently, without spoilers, 5 dungeons are down. I don't know what that means as far as how many I have left. I just know there is a section where you're supposed to explore 3 areas, and I have explored 1. I am at the second one, but I'm also just like exploring the world. The world that they built was super fun. So many little like nooks and crannies and secrets to explore, very much like Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, where you're just kind of wandering the world and finding little nuggets everywhere for you to just kind of reward the little dopamine hits in your head. So anyway, but that's pretty much it. I just like this weekend, I was like, going out to see a movie, and I was like, I just want to play Echoes of Wisdom. I don't want to go anywhere. I just want to finish this game. So honestly, I'm probably going to go do that right now. But what about y'all? What have y'all been playing?
Yeah, Summer.
Yeah, not much. While I was waiting for a coat of paint to dry on a prop, because I'm mostly just in convention prep mode.
Sure.
My roommate was playing a round of Hades, so I was like, oh, I want to do a round of Hades. Saw that my last playthrough wasn't since like September, and managed to do a run on, I was using the spear with the aspect of Achilles, and I did it on a heat 11 in 32 minutes. If anybody cares about all of those stats.
Whoa.
Nice.
So
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Baller.
pretty for having not played it for like 5 months, like 6 months, whatever months, not too bad.
What about you, Dustin? You've been playing anything cool recently?
Yeah, I mean, my sort of all-time genre is tactical RPGs, and it seems like every like 5 years I'll do a playthrough of Final Fantasy Tactics. So I just finished a Tactics playthrough. I'm kind of continuing in that same sort of genre, and I just started over the weekend a playthrough of Shining Force 2.
Nice.
On Genesis, which is for me like one of my all-time favorites. It really got me into tactical RPGs. So yeah,
very cool.
That's what I've been on.
Oh yeah, we love it when someone's like, "I've been playing a Genesis game lately." It doesn't happen every week. It's really nice.
I love it when we talk about tactical RPGs. But
so good.
Yeah,
there we go.
So good.
Yeah,
yeah. The biggest Fire Emblem stan on earth on the podcast here you're talking to. So
yeah.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode on the tariffs and how it will affect the future of the Nintendo Switch 2. Thank you so much, Dustin, for joining us on this episode. What an absolute delight and pleasure to have you on and just to get your knowledge and your insight into this. I'm really glad we were able to work it out. Many thanks to Matt for the hookup on getting you on the show. Matt's still around and kicking in the background, as you can tell. I'd like to also thank MilkyWay.co for doing our website. I'd like to thank Corduroy for doing our music. Thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon. And if you'd like to find me online, I am pretty much everywhere on the internet at Monolith Fiji.
You can find me most places at Weebwitched.
You can find me online at Bordan.
And what about you, Dustin? Where can people find you online?
On most things, I am at Econ with Dustin.
Very good. Very good. Definitely check them out there. Also, enroll in Belmont University if you'd like to have more
take my classes.
Yeah. That's a great thing. I hope that you understand that by coming on this podcast, we are now all allowed to audit any of your classes at any time. I hope that's understood. I look forward to that as well. Obviously joking. But if you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Blue Sky and Twitter. We are at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We have a website, switchheadz.com. We have a Patreon, like I said, and a Discord. Please join us on Discord. We'll have links to that in the description of this show. Whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're listening to it on Apple or Spotify or any of the other podcasting apps, click the description in there to join us over there. And please leave a review on Apple, like and comment on YouTube, and more than anything, please share the show with your friends. Word of mouth does wonders. And hey, what other podcast is bringing an economist on to talk about the tariffs, right? Come on. We're breaking new ground here. Anyway, that's going to do it for the episode, but we're going to be back next week with another banger of an episode, so don't touch that dial. But in the meantime, gang, you guys know the drill. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Be safe out there. Now's a great time to get organized. That's all I'll say. We love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.